now having like 10 years behind you and having that like awareness of being in your 30s, how do you kind of set up the future for the long term to make sure you have like a long sustainable music career?
I think that's the question a lot of people are asking. Like, touring used to be the one reliable way to make money as a musician, and now there are no reliable ways. Um, I've been saying, like, you know, the potential to lose a lot of money is not really a quality you look for in a job, really. But that's what musicians are faced with on tour. It's a financial risk. Um, but I mean, for me, I feel like probably the next thing that Pine Grove will do after this tour coming up is just record an album and maybe not tour on it, and then record another album and maybe tour on that. I don't know, but like kind of a different sort of expectation about how often touring is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And I really like, I've always liked what David Byrne says. It's like you go out on the road when you have something new to say. And I like the idea of just like, okay, here are 22 songs that you've never heard us play before.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, you probably had the same moment of shock when you got home and looked at the gas prices and had to do a double take, because when you're in Europe looking at stuff in liters,
Yeah,
it doesn't
right.
quite hit you as hard. And then you see the gallons, you're like, oh shit, 570 a gallon. So I think I think bands have been doing this so long where we're kind of in a sense in a little bit of a mental hamster wheel because you go through the motions. You're like, oh, well, what do? We make something and then we go drive around in an unmarked white van and try to sell it. And it's a really a serious time to kind of reevaluate that. Maybe we start making holograms of ourselves and sending those out on tour. Maybe we make actual clones or cyborgs. I don't know what it looks like, but you can maybe relate. Like, I think a lot of the most fulfilling times as a musician or any creative person are when you're just in a place making shit all the time rather than out there trying to peddle it or sell it. And I like that part of it too, but it's not as fulfilling.
I agree with a lot of that, definitely. I mean, for me, the most exciting part is, uh, well, it's probably a tie between like the initial conception of the idea, i.e., writing the song, and then hearing it for the first time, like externalized in a recording that sounds good to me and is maybe even better than what I imagined or surprising somehow. Um, not that I haven't had totally amazing and transcendent experiences performing, but it's just a little bit less consistent of a thrill. Um, and I think about when I'm listening to recordings by like Townes Van Zandt or George Harrison, and I'm like really having, or any artist that's not alive anymore, and you're still having like such a connection. It's like I'm so thankful for the recordings that they left.
Mm. Yeah.
And that was maybe the first thought that shifted me away from like we need to play as many shows as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Because you hear, I mean, now you even look at some of the biggest artists of all time, Bob Dylan or whoever, and Bruce Springsteen. They're selling their publishing catalogs off
Mhm.
because I think they're starting to realize. Obviously, they don't need the money, but they're starting to realize it's like, whoa, I need like some people to like work my catalog when I'm dead. Otherwise, it's just going to disappear because that as every year that goes by, the amount of streams and downloads and sales of a band starts to dip. So I think
Yeah.
yeah, that's a real thing even for people on the absolute top of the food chain. But yeah, I mean, I think like having a trying to have some sort of legacy to begin with is just a trap, because
Yes.
we're all pretty much toast. Do you fall into
Yeah.
that? Do you it's like
Oh,
are you
like
like, oh, I need to make
climate
something
despondency?
people, yeah, like I need to make something people remember me by.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's a very seductive idea. Um, but I try my best to just, to aim for personal satisfaction and making music for the people I know personally and love. But well, and the other thing you kind of implied is like, well, how long are we even going to be around here for? Like, is that just a mirage legacy at this point? Is that just a are we fantasticating was the word I wanted to say. May I
Yeah,
coin?
I mean, I don't know much about you, but from what I understand, you're kind of into nature and stuff. I'm sure when you like go out to a national park and stand next to a boulder in Utah, you kind of realize like what a finite speck of dust you really are.
Absolutely. And time scale is just like, when I'm anxious about something to happen in the next 15 minutes, it's like, just go stand next to a rock.
Yeah, we need to get giant boulders just in the backyard
Yeah.
for perspective. Yeah, man, I don't know. I kind of get anxious about anything I've ever done. Like even this podcast, it's like I've done it a million times. I know what I'm doing. I'm confident in what I'm doing. But then there's like this just hour of lead up where you sit and think about it forever. And I don't know. Maybe that's just part of being a person, and it's part of like the cycles of your brain. I don't know if you deal with that, but if I kind of thought about that any more than I already did, I would probably cancel everything I've ever had on the books, because it's like, it's just easier to exist.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. You can't think about it too much. But I'm definitely pretty susceptible to nervousness and anxiety. It's something I experience quite a bit. I get nervous before every time we play. I got nervous before this podcast, so I'm starting to settle in. Um, yeah, and nature helps calm it, moving my body, singing, which I think really the thing behind singing is that it just requires breathing. So there's a lot of that going on. But uh, I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet.
What were some of like your more anxious years where it was really starting to come down on you?
Hmm. Well, I remember thinking, or like, watching my peers as a elementary school student, as like maybe 8-year-old Evan, and thinking like, wow, some of my friends seem really anxious. That's not a feeling I feel at all. Thank goodness. But then like starting around 14, 14 to, well, maybe like 26 or 27, I really was just a very socially uncomfortable person. And then I think maybe what happened around 26 and 27, first of all, I was just mostly meeting people who like already knew my band. So that was a different type of um, social experience and kind of less pressure because I thought, well, okay, they may be, you know, uh, maybe they've decided they like me already or something like that. I didn't have to prove anything. Um, but but yeah, I mean, pretty much teenagehood into the 20s, all of that was like pretty tough,
Yeah,
and
were
still,
there any?
still to a degree, is tough.
Yeah, I mean, no kidding. Like getting into middle school, high school, just like the more I talk to peers and friends about those years, the more I realize I think we had like a really bizarre amount of bullies per capita in our high
Mm,
school. Like,
hmm.
it was like a really conservative area, and you're piling in 8 grade schools at once into a middle school, which is also built into a high school. So yeah, it's just kind of a breeding ground for people kind of like trying to get their footing, and no one knows who the hell they are. And
Right.
the cliques like you see in movies,
Yeah.
from American Pie to whatever, and name any high school movie, Mean Girls. I mean, all that stuff was so spot on true, from
Right.
the goths to the metalheads to the emo kids to the hacky sack guys. It was wild how spot on that stuff was. But
Mm,
yeah, I can relate to that in that sense. And I last summer I was trying to kind of come to grips with some of that stuff, and I did a mushroom trip down by the lake, and like all I could think about was just getting yelled at by like this mean teacher in seventh grade who, probably wasn't a bad lady, just had like shithead kids like raining on her parade all day. And like just how much like fear and anxiety and like worrying about forgetting assignments and worrying about
Yes.
people getting mad at me. And like I just kind of like all I did was I saw like a seventh grade little emo version of little Brett, and I just like gave him a hug, and I was like crying and tripping on mushrooms and bawling. And then it was a nice cathartic experience. And then I try to take notes when I do these types of things,
Yeah.
and I looked in my little pocket notebook the next day under notes from the mushroom trip, and all it said in there was give all money away.
It's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. Where did you grow up?
um, just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
home of Wayne's World and Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, good claims to fame.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I mean, what a good way to process that sort of stuff. And who among us doesn't have those kind of unmetabolized middle school? I mean, I hesitate to call them traumas just because they're so common, but like stuff that really sticks with you. Teachers who were, not sensitive to your developing mind in how they treated you. But hey, who's to say? Maybe we did deserve it. Maybe we did. Maybe we were really shitheads and needed to be put in our place. I don't know. But I have similar memories for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was a piece of shit, but not really like in the grand scale. I think my
Right.
buddy Pete D had a good point. He was like, all kids are pricks. And he was being funny, but he was being serious because, it's just true. It's you're in it for little Evan or little Brett, and that's just part of being a person. I think there's no reason to like dwell on shitty things you did as a little kid in your adult life. So if you want to apologize to people, I've done that. I've like gone back and found people on Facebook and been like, hey, sorry, I was a douche in this moment. And that's I think that's a decent thing to do.
Yeah. How'd that feel for you?
Um,
Were you able to let it go, or did it just dive you right back into the moment?
Yeah, no, it was good. You get like those intense butterflies in your stomach leading up to it. I remember like, I mean, my parents are rad. They were like disciplinarians, but my pops was like scary disciplinarian. We're like best friends now, but I remember in second grade, I don't know, how old are you in second grade, Evan? You're like
Mm, maybe 8.
8. I remember I told this girl she smelled bad, and I did it like multiple days in a row, and somehow my parents caught wind of this, and they marched me over to her house down the street, and it was horrifying. I had to like go in the house, apologize to her and her whole family. It was like this one of the scariest days of my life, and but that was like my folks. They would do stuff like that. They were good citizens, and as scary as the
Hmm.
disciplinary stuff could be, it was all good stuff.
Yeah, learning how to be accountable. I mean, that's good. Learning how to apologize. That's an important lesson.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think we bottle stuff up, and there's like nothing that's too horrible to say out loud. I think
Yeah.
nothing's as bad as you build it up to be in your head. So when you find that like person who you can go to for these types of hard things or hard talks, it's just, I mean, that's all I could recommend is just spill it out.
I think that's right. Yeah, just saying it, just hearing yourself say it. But yeah, I mean, like, so I have had a couple of experiences where I've gone to somebody, like a decade past and said, like, hey, I know I did this thing. Um, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. And I've done that 3 times to, just like people I was mean to when I was a teenager. Mean is even the wrong word, but just whatever. There was a conflict. And none of the people even remembered the incident.
Oh, interesting.
0 for 3.
Well, that's
Pretty
yeah. I mean,
interesting, right?
yeah,
Illustrative,
totally.
right?
I think that's the tax of being a sensitive person. And it's better to play it safe and reach out and do that. I'm sure even though they didn't remember it, they thought it was rad that you did that, you know?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Did you have did you have any like arch rivals or like classic bullies that gave you a hard time growing up that you can think of?
Yeah.
Any good
Yeah.
stories or funny names of the bullies, funny nicknames? I feel like bullies always have great nicknames.
Oh yeah. I remember there was a kid who he was like, like incredibly confident and kind of dumb. Um, and just in a pretty public setting once said, Evan Hall has a small meat, and like 30 people laughed in my face.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably coming eventually, right? Just the
Of course.
rhyming scheme, you
Of
know?
course. Though I really liked the unrhymed and stop there. That was the brilliant part.
That was a
Evan
nice
Hall has a
corner.
small meat. What a bizarre end to that poem.
Dude, this kid
But
should
I
be a
loved it.
songwriter.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That stuff, it's all good laughs in time. Trying to think who some of the classic bullies of our high school. I remember this one time. There was this kid named Coogie, and he was I don't know. We just had like an arch rivalry. We both had like shitty ska bands, and like had like a rivalry between our shitty ska bands. And he like threw a hacky sack at me, and it like hit me in the neck or something, and I got really pissed off, rightfully so. And I snuck up behind him, and I tapped his books out of his hand in the hallway, but the books. And he had like folders and books and paper shoved in the folders. And the books, I'll never forget, they spilled forward in this like perfect symmetrical fashion. And as they hit the floor, they hit like top first and just exploded across the hallway in like the middle of like 100 kids. It was brutal. I felt like a total asshole, even though I thought he deserved it. And then one of his buddies, I think I can't remember his name, Lil Marcus. He was like a legal small person, like he was, just a small man legally, and he just completely like shoved me against a locker. I was like twice as tall as this guy, and this guy like almost choked me unconscious in the middle of the hallway. So I got my ass kicked by a legal small person, which I don't know if I deserved, but I'm with Little Marcus that he stuck up for his buddy. I think that's cool, but I felt the book spill was justified.
It probably was. I mean, that's tit for tat.
So what's getting you pumped up about the future?
You know, I mean, that's an important question because there's so much to get down about. But that's not your question. It's what am I getting up about? And I'm psyched to see in my community there's some really excellent climate organizing going on. There's a movement for public utilities that seems to really be catching on, and it's just this cool grassroots effort that I've been privileged to be a part of when I'm home. So that's one thing that's like genuinely heartening.
What are climate utilities? What does that mean?
The so utilities, as in electricity, heating.
Okay.
There's a movement to make a public option for utilities. Basically, utilities right now, as we know them, are private entities that can charge you as much as they want. And what we want is publicly owned utilities, i.e. not for profit, so they'd be way cheaper, and any quote unquote profit or extra money would just go back into the system for repairs, for improvements, for making them more sustainable and renewable. it seems like a great idea, and a lot of people are on board. And everybody hates our utility company, Central Hudson. So it's kind of a slam dunk. I mean that's one thing. Like in a moment in our country where it seems like there are no new good ideas being tried, it's important to remember that there are good ideas. The government just kind of lacks the political courage. And I have to say that these are all peers. These are people in their 30s and 40s and 20s and 50s in the area who have been frustrated with how things are going and are, just all volunteers just making this happen. So that's one thing that's pretty exciting to me. Yeah.
And is that national in the US? Like utilities are all private in general?
In general, yeah. There are a couple of exceptions. I think in Nebraska they have some form of public utilities. But the conversation is going on in New York State and in California. It's kind of a progressive or socialist idea. But, like with most socialist ideas, it's really, it's an effort to protect the working class from corporate overreach.
So there's really no way to like police any of the private utilities, so they can, like you said, they just can kind of make up a bill. There's no way to look behind the curtain.
Yeah, well, so there's like a regulatory system, but these people receive donations from the utility companies. So it's it's just legalized bribery.
What do people do like on a, I think when people think of environmental change and climate change, it's like I think it can be a pretty helpless feeling for people. What do you do on like a micro level in your own day to day that actually makes a difference?
Yeah, well, I think that part of the reason people are so upset is that we've been hearing over and over that it's like the consumer's fault in a way, like you're not recycling enough, and that's why the climate crisis is about to happen, not because of say 10 companies who are responsible for the majority of the emissions, including the American military. So it's really like a budgetary issue and not a private citizen issue. That's not to say that we shouldn't be having the mindset where you leave a room, you turn off the light, you try not to waste water. We're treating these like precious things. But I think the answer is like the best thing you can do is to just get involved with local organizing. And meet other people who will help you feel less despondent. And, these people are cool and they're energized and they're optimistic, and those are good people to be around.
What does America do with all our garbage? Because I feel like I try to not create a ton of trash, but I look at my garbage cans at the end of a week and they're like jammed full. And just from me, I'm like, good Lord, like, where does all this stuff go?
Yeah, landfills. I mean, they just like compress it and bury it.
Damn.
Yeah, and a lot of it gets sent overseas. Yeah, I know it's really depressing. And recycling, like NPR has done some journalism on this, but like it kind of doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Like we were selling it, a lot of it to China, and they just stopped taking it because there was too much. Although I'm pretty sure paper recycling is still like a thing, but plastic, yeah, dude, plastic is so bad. But again, like I think it's just so important to say this as much as possible. It's like not an individual consumer issue. It is, the fact that our government is not reining in these 10 most polluting companies. I mean, many of them are fossil fuel companies, and then also it's really tied into our military budget and the imperialist project. Like the American military is just using so much fuel, so much.
Damn. I was gonna say, like, maybe we should just have like live streams of all the biggest landfills in the world that you can tune into at any time to like visibly show people like how nasty this is, and maybe that would like have some sort of sway on a micro level, but it now that you say like all the waste is coming from corporations, that starts to feel a little helpless to me, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, right. It's not just because we can't do everything doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a statistical non-issue in a way, like when you look at the biggest polluters. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a matter of like developing regulations, making I, I mean, we need to like nationalize the energy system, I feel like. To make it a not-for-profit system. Like people should not be continuing to profit off of the destruction of the planet.
God damn. And is that kind of what your album's about as well?
Well, in a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, it's my effort to, I'm talking, a bit soapbox like about an issue that's really close to me, but the album is more like an emotional processing of this. I don't think it would quite work if it was like in this kind of didactic mode. It has to be filtered through um, the heart
Mm.
for it to make sense as music.
Yeah, yeah. You mean, and
So,
what does
yeah,
didactic mean? Does that mean like giving advice, unsolicited
yeah. I
advice, or?
mean, it's sort of the way a lot of people use it is like to it's condescending, like professorial, but like you don't really uh, quite have the authority to say so. But
Oh,
it's used in
dude,
a few different ways.
professorial, another great word. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and so I think that for anybody who, I mean, it's my hope that anybody who's listening to 1111, our new album, it can open a space to feel upset, to feel angry, and hopefully to feel a little bit of extra courage to get out there and get involved in your own small and beautiful way.
Yeah, man. Well, I mean, thanks for doing that. I think that's cool. It's awesome to have like a parallel mission alongside of songwriting and writing tunes. I think that's really important. And I've just, I've kind of only recently stumbled upon your band, but one thing that caught me immediately is like how much you guys sound like you're from the Midwest, because I'm a Midwest guy, and that
Yeah.
you grew up around the Midwest, which I didn't know until talking to you today, because it says you guys are from Jersey. But um, I just I love that sound, and I think it's going to be really important as technology and music kind of collide and mesh into one in the future, and more and music sounds more and more perfect and flawless
Hmm.
and almost like robotic, and you can make these perfect sounding drums right on your computer. The fact that you guys sound like human beings playing guitars and singing, and you're like, oh, that's clearly a live drum set. It's a bunch of fellas
Hmm.
in a room playing lyrically driven music.
Hmm.
I think that's just going to stand the test of time. Not only because you got great songs, but the production. I think that's really important, and it's a relief for me to see you doing well and seeing that people like give a shit about like good organic homemade music.
Thanks so much. Thanks for all of that. Like, it's definitely, I think, an emotional point of entry if it sounds a bit homespun. Like you can sort of walk into the room that the music is being made in. That's the hope.
Was that the hope from the beginning, or were you just like, okay, here's our band, let's just play into microphones, and that's what came out?
Yeah, I think that I wanted to make something that sounded like I made it. I'm very interested in art where you can see the hand of the author a little bit. To me, that feels authentic, and it is an opportunity or just like another layer to connect with, maybe. And sometimes it can feel like a puzzle when there are a lot of narrative layers going on. So yeah, that's always exciting to me, and I listen to a lot of music that might be considered lo-fi,
Me too.
and
Yeah.
it's not. I wouldn't necessarily consider Pinegrove lo-fi, but we're influenced by that sort of stuff, definitely.
Mid-fi.
Yeah, mid-fi. That's what we
Mid-fi.
do.
Do you work on any other creative projects outside of music?
Yeah, I mean, I have some reading projects. I really like literature, especially 20th century stuff. I studied English in college, and I write prose too sometimes. I like to paint as well. All the Pinegrove albums are paintings I've done.
Nice, man.
The covers, I mean.
Cool. Yeah, I've actually got really into painting over the pandemic as well, and it's been
Oh, that's great.
it's yeah,
What sort of
such a
stuff do you do?
massive catharsis. I do a lot of like pop art, like I do landscapes. Um, I don't know if I have any within reach, but yeah, kind of abstract cities with the buildings like bending and fall, kind of falling over in bright colors, vibrant colors. I've always been fascinated with like vibrant signage and old like
Yes.
hand painted signs from like the 50s, 60s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
dude, I'm
I'd love
looking
to
at
see some.
yeah, for sure, man. I'm looking at my Zoom and I've never seen this before in my life. It says you have less than a minute remaining
Oh, yeah.
unless you upgrade. But
Yeah.
okay, cool. Let's sign back in a sec. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, regarding painting, man, I think it's just you've been a band 10 years. You've been doing it so long. You've probably been writing songs since you were 14 or whatever. I think after you do the lap a bunch of times, it's like, all right, I need to do something else to kind of prove I can do something beyond songwriting and kind of,
Hmm.
like whoop your own ass creatively.
Oh, definitely. And even with songwriting, I feel like I've had so many times where I felt like, well, I'm probably at the end of the line with this idea. Uh, and then you find another little gold mine. You mess with that for a bit, but I'm now at a place where I think that I do kind of need to intentionally shift gears a little bit with the types of sounds I want to explore, uh, because I'm not interested in making 1111 again. I'm not interested in making Cardinal again. Um, I I do this to entertain myself and um, to process emotions. Whatever I'm feeling today, and what I'm feeling today is not the same. Um, yeah, and my interests are changing. I think just like anybody. So yeah, I within and without the genre, there's definitely you got to keep exposing yourself to new ideas, or else it starts to get stale.
Yeah, I
That's for
think
sure.
you just came off a really long European tour, and I know how like strenuous touring can be, and you get done. It's like this thing you've been working on forever. It's a shitload of work. You do the shows, you sell the merch, you do a lap around the world. You get that celebratory feeling for a few days, and then what do you do when you get home?
Well, I think it's pretty common, and for me too. There's a bit of a post-tour malaise. There's like you're moving from a highly structured day where every single day you have an objective. There's a point to the day. It's all leading up to the show, and you try to make the show as good as possible. And before that, you try to make decisions that will enhance the quality of the show, that will help you be lucid and energetic during that hour and a half. And then you come off tour and you don't have that structure. It can be kind of depressing, actually. Um, and I'm moving right now. Like, I'm in the process of moving to a new place, and so feeling just a little bit unanchored.
Hmm.
Like, I don't exactly know where my home is right now.
Yeah, do you have a significant other, or what's your family structure like?
No, single. I live by myself. I'm an only child. I've my parents are both living, and they're both remarried. Um, Stepbrother and stepsister who are my same age and twins. So that's sort of interesting.
Mm.
But yeah, I live up here by myself. I'm in the Hudson Valley. Uh, no neighbors to bother.
Who's your
That's
best friend?
Oh, good question. I mean, that sometimes changes, but for many years it's been Zach who plays drums in the band. We've been playing music together since we were 7 years old.
You guys live in the same town?
We live across the river from each other,
Oh, that's
but
awesome, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like as the crow flies, probably it'd be 20 minutes, but because of the way bridges are, you have to like go down and then across and then up. So it actually takes an hour.
Oh, damn.
I know
Um,
it's pretty dumb,
but that's
but
incredible, man. I feel like the more time goes on and it is hard to live in the same city as your best friend, and I
hmm
think that's just so important. Like any chance you can get to live in the same city as your main person, that's so key. And I'm feeling this weird disconnect to Milwaukee right now. It's the
yeah.
city I love so much, but like a couple of my best friends have moved out of town in the last year, and it's been a real shakeup. And I got home and I'm like, what do I do now? And I think I feel like we've never had any like grand success like on selling out theaters over the world or whatever as a band, but I do feel like we've done pretty good. This is pretty neat that we're even able still doing this at all into our 30s and mid 30s. But I've started to have kind of these existential like crossroads of like, well, what do I do now outside of like professional life? I feel like pretty good about professional life. Is it time to have a kid? My best friend
hmm
left town. What do
hmm
I do? I've never felt more single. But I feel like I'm also probably done being single. You know that feeling?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, has that hit you at all kind of entering your early mid 30s?
There are definitely some like life boxes that it's like, oh, is it time to check these? But at the same time, I think that there's like a real cultural pressure to do certain things at a certain time in your life. So I suppose that whatever feelings I'm feeling about settling down or something like that, I'm also kind of trying to resist because that's just there are mainstream reasons that those are pushed on us,
Hmm.
and I don't know. I don't really lead a very ordinary life.
Yeah, and I think too, sitting in your position, you have a lot to offer the world as a free person right now. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like I'm sure if you could agree if you were like working I don't know, if you were like a dentist that just lived in Jersey full time, it would maybe make more sense to start cranking out some kids, but you got a lot of people leaning on you, and that's got to be a cool feeling too. It's like you're for lack of a better term, you must feel useful to people.
Hmm. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. But like I said, when we were talking about like expectations for the music's reach, I'm really just trying to. It's way better psychologically to keep the expectations very localized. Like I'm doing this to work through feelings. I want to please myself creatively and the people I'm close to. And if I kind of use that as a barometer or a weather vane better,
That's well said.
that's probably the best way to do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
For me at least.
there's really only so much you can control, and I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I'm kind of a control freak when it comes
Hmm.
to I mean, definitely music, and probably
Yeah.
that trickles out to like life outside of music as well. So um I'm really
Yeah.
trying to kind of tackle that and be less of a head case about that stuff, and delegate. And I think stuff that just would knock me off balance years ago or get me flustered or worked up, or even something as dumb as like someone not returning my email that I had like high hopes for. It's like I would be like that would rattle me for an hour or two or three, and now it's just like, who gives a who gives a shit? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, a thing happened, an event happened, whatever. Like you can't do anything, move on. Time to make more decisions and just move in a forward direction.
Pretty zen of you. Good job, Brett.
Oh, shit. I hope that didn't sound pretentious.
Not at all. No, I
Okay,
no, I
cool.
mean it sincerely. Sorry. Yeah. It's no, that's the ideal, I think, to be able to try to stay present, say I did my best, and if it doesn't work out, you try to learn from that, but you don't get so wrapped up in it. That's what I'm hearing you
Yeah, and
describe.
I think especially at the last couple of years with the COVIDius and the elections and everything got so politicized, it was like this peak of I need to change the world from my desktop culture, which I
Hmm.
don't know if we've really seen in full force before. And it just kind of felt like everyone was kind of flailing and typing and enraged and picking battles all the time. And I think even if you have the best intentions in the world, and I know I felt like I did, and so many of my friends did, and people I know, even if you do have those like well-intentioned messages you're sending out into the world, you got to know you can only change the tiny circumference of the inertia around you, with just the people you're close to. And once you start blasting out into the ether, into the macro, it just seems like a lost cause.
I hear that, but on the other hand, I think that we're way more powerful actually than we realized. And that there's a lot of power in finding other people that are upset with how things are going, um, and coming together and talking about solutions and talking about uh, getting together to change something. I think that it's the conclusion that we have a very small circumference of influence is actually really benefiting the ruling class.
Yeah, right. Well said. What do you how does it go from here, particularly in the States, as you start to see like more monopolies, and not to take this in a dark direction, but you start to see smaller businesses having a harder time, and
Yes.
people feeling more irrelevant, I think is the big one.
Hmm.
Where does this kind of go? What's the good news here?
Well, man, I mean that's totally the question. I think that people are feeling really disempowered at work. That's like one of the major things. It's like the bosses keep winning, right? And the workers who create the value are not getting fairly compensated. But more and more workers are realizing this, and we're seeing unions across the country pick up steam. There are efforts to unionize uh, Amazon warehouses, some successful. Starbucks has like almost 100 unionized stores at this point. So there's a lot of momentum with that. And I really think that if workers felt more empowered, um, and if we got a living wage in place, like $20 an hour, say, if we got universal health care, which is overwhelmingly popular, something like 80% of Americans, regardless of party affiliation, support that, which makes sense after 1 million people died of the coronavirus in the United States alone. Um, you know, People are realizing more and more that their neighbor's health impacts their health, and it matters that all of us have access to healthcare, or rather, can get healthcare when they need it. These things I think would actually bring a lot of, uh, I don't know, it could start to lift the cloud a bit. These things that I'm describing, I think, are pretty actionable. Like they could happen in the next couple of years, with enough public pressure, because these things are so popular. And if we can see that happen, then I think that people will start to feel like, oh, it is possible to change bad things.
Oh yeah,
And then
man.
and then the dominoes will start to fall, and we might respond effectively to the climate crisis. We might start to look at actually repairing our history of genocide by uh, giving reparations to the descendants of slaves, maybe acknowledging the genocide against indigenous people. Like right now, I think we're seeing this culture of like unacknowledged violence. The violence that was required to develop and is required to sustain capitalism. Um, we're seeing all of that unacknowledged, and it's coming out in, for instance, all these mass shootings. That's one way. We have unempowered workers, disempowered workers who have a history of national violence in their blood, and we wonder why this happens all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just my analysis. Feel free to disagree, but that's what
Uh,
I'm seeing.
no, that was an amazing answer, dude. Um, yeah, I think along the lines of like unionizing. I don't know if you noticed this, but just flying out of London yesterday and flying, there was a train strike in the city. So I was like trying to get to the airport, and the trains just weren't running. So everyone's trying to hail
Mm,
cabs.
mm,
Eventually, it took an hour for the cab to come. Got to the airport, it's just like lines out the door. It's completely psychotic. And
wow.
so
I hadn't heard about that. That's really
those
interesting.
the fact that those workers got together and went on strike, it fucked the whole city of London. It was like, so clearly, I mean, that's going to have some sort of positive effect for the workers. And you're noticing it now, even on the way back into Chicago. People don't want to work at airports because it sucks. So
Hmm.
they're on strike, or there's just people not coming into work. And yeah, it sucks when you're flying in and out of there because it takes like 3 hours, and there's nothing more soul crushing than standing in a queue for 3 hours sweating. But
Sure. Yeah.
the impacts of these strikes are, you feel them, so
Yeah,
they
it's genuinely disruptive, and that's
yeah,
exactly like what we need for workers to say like, "Hey, you need me, so respect me."
there you go. So if you're listening, everyone go on strike. Don't go, no, don't go to
Yeah,
work
well,
tomorrow.
no, and actually, I think that one of the main goals of all this organizing I'm talking about, whether it's local climate organizing or unions, um, could be to eventually organize a general strike. I mean, like, how effective would it be to have just okay? You look at like how badly they wanted to get people back to work, even under unsafe conditions under COVID. They're like, oh well, the entire economy will collapse. I think they really tipped their hand there. It's like, yes, we could collapse the entire economy
Mm.
with just a week of a general strike. Uh, or like when that boat like clogged the Suez Canal or some
Oh
canal,
yeah, I remember that.
like the whole global economy melted down for a day. It's like, yeah, it really is all so integrated, and it would be possible to say, um, workers are going to stop work regardless of their position until we have a $20 minimum wage and universal health care.
Mm.
or
Yeah,
or
man. I
or
mean,
something like that. I mean, that would go, or to ban assault weapons, or whatever the cause. But I personally favor something that would just be like really materially beneficial to the working class.
yeah, dude. I mean, utilities like the people at
Yeah,
the power
public.
plant
Yes, yes.
strike, like the power goes out. I mean,
Yeah.
that's. I mean, there you go. Well, dude, this you're an amazing dude, Evan Hall. It was really good to talk to you.
Thank you, Brett.
I
Nice to meet
feel
you.
my morale is like much higher after this riff with you. So thanks for that.
Yeah, yeah. I think the takeaway is that there are ideas that are being proposed and that are on the table. It just, the people who happen to be in power don't fucking support them,
There it
support the good
is.
ideas. So, we got to figure out a way to wrest back power. And music is a pretty good way to organize as well. You're bringing all these people into a room. You're letting me talk on your podcast. Um, and it's at very least it's time to start thinking about these things. If you're listening and disagree, like, that's totally fine, but I'm happy that that we're having this conversation, that people are getting the gears turning. What are some solutions to the very broken country that we have?
Oh, Evan, man, you're a sweet dude. Thanks for doing this. This was such a good time. And please pick up a record. 1111. That's the new one, right?
Yeah,
Yes. Scoop it directly from the band website, so Bezos doesn't take 44% or whatever it is these days.
that's right.
All right,
Thank
brother.
you.
Much love. Have a great day. Enjoy the world.
Much love, Brett. Thank you.